Perek Yud Gimel Mishnah Zayin. The last Mishnah of this Perek discusses again the theme of Tzeda and discusses a very interesting concept. Yoshev ha'echad ala Pesach. We're talking about a case where a deer had already entered the house, but there was some sort of entranceway, there was a front door which was wide open, and a person came along, Yoshev ha'echad ala Pesach, and sat himself in the doorway of this house. V'lo milahu, but he didn't fully block the doorway. In other words, imagine there's a big doorway to the house, and a person sits down, but there's plenty of room for the animal to exit, to go out. So then, Yoshev hasheni milahu, a second person comes along and sits down next to him, and thereby blocks the entrance. Hasheni chayev, the second person is chayev, because, as the Baratunura says, shehu tzodosoi, because the second person did the Ma'aseh Tzeda. He is the one who has now trapped the animal in. When the first person came along and sat down, he hasn't done a Ma'aseh Tzeda, because the animal wasn't trapped in, he could easily walk out. When the second one comes along and sits and thereby blocks the entrance, he is the one who's done a Ma'aseh Tzeda, and therefore the second one is going to be chayiv. Continues the Mishnah. Yoshev harishna ala Pesach u'milohu. Now, if the first person comes along, and he sits in the entranceway, but he sits in a way that blocks the entranceway, and so of course he's done the Ma'aseh Tzeda. Okay, but the story hasn't finished. Ubo hasheni, the second one comes along, the yoshav b'tzidoi, and the second one comes along and sits down next to him. Now the second one hasn't done a Ma'aseh Tzeda, because the animal's already trapped. The first guy is sitting there and has blocked the doorway. The second one comes along and sits either next to him, inside of him, but he hasn't done an extra Ma'aseh. He's just sort of added security, as it were, to make the animal further trapped, but he hasn't actually done a Ma'aseh Tzeda. Aval pi she'omet harishan. Even if the first person stands up, v'holach lo walks away, and thereby the animal is trapped in because of the second person sitting there, nonetheless, harishan chayav v'hasheni potter. Nevertheless, the first person is chayav because he did a Ma'aseh Tzeda. He sat himself down across the whole entranceway and thereby did a Ma'aseh Tzeda. But the second one is potter. The second one is potter because he never did a Ma'aseh Tzeda. He came along when the animal was already trapped in there, and he merely sat down. And there's an interesting chiddush here. The Mishnah Berurah says in Siman Shin Tes Zayin, Sifkoten Chafhei, the Mishnah Berurah says an amazing thing. It's mutter for the second person to sit there, even if he's continuing to sit there, is with the intention for the animal to be trapped. Since the second person never did an initial act, a new act of Tzeda, he's merely guarding an animal which was already trapped. So therefore, even if his kavanah is to trap to make sure the animal doesn't go out, doesn't make a difference. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it will be absolutely fine. And indeed, when it says here, V'hasheni potter, the Gemara in Kuf Zayin Omid Aleph in Shabbos says that normally, of course, potter means potter avlosa. But Minat Torah he's not chayev, but the Midrabanan he's going to be chayev potter avlosa. But the Gemara says there are 3 instances throughout the entire Masechta that when it says potter actually means potter avul mutter, that even 100% it's mutter lechatchila for him to do it, and this is one of them. So v'hasheni potter means, as the Mishnah Berurah said, that it's mutter lechatchila for the second person to come along and to stay there, and there's no problem with him sitting there when the first person has already blocked it. And indeed, once the first person is gone, the second person can stay there, and he's not doing a new Ma'aseh Tzeda, therefore it's 100% mutter. Concludes the Mishnah, what is this comparable to? What is this case analogous to? If a person locks his house in order to guard it, the Baratunura says, not to trap the animal, because the animal's already trapped, but just to lock it as an extra form of security. And the animal, the deer, is already found, is found trapped inside it. So then he's going to be potter. And the analogy is this: since the deer is already trapped inside the house, when this person came along and locked the door, he's not doing a Ma'aseh Tzeda. He's not doing an act of trapping. And therefore, even if the animal was sort of to release himself from the rope that he was tied in, or whatever the initial trap was, and the animal would escape from that, but he's now sort of confined to this house because the person has locked the door. That person is going to be potter, because when he came along and locked the door, he didn't do a ma'aseh tzeidah. The animal was already trapped. So too over here, when the second person came along and sat down, since the animal was already trapped because the first person was sitting there, he came along, he never did a ma'aseh tzeidah. And therefore, even if the first person were to go away, then the second person is potter, because he never did a ma'aseh tzeidah. That is the end of Mishnah Zayin and the end of the 13th Perek.